This is why every narcissist leaves you with different emotional scars. The aftermath of a narcissistic relationship is rarely straightforward, because it carries a unique emotional signature. It cannot be neatly categorized as complex trauma, nor can it be fully described as moral injury, yet it borrows elements from both. Survivors walk a thin line between these two territories, navigating the disorienting mix of wounds that such relationships leave behind. Confusion often sets in, self-blame, self-doubt, endless cycles of rumination, regrets both large and small. There may be sorrow over ever entering the relationship in the first place, or guilt tied to specific words spoken or actions taken. Loneliness and isolation become constant companions, alongside a sense of disconnection from one's own emotions. Powerlessness, helplessness, and hopelessness are frequent visitors. Survivors often describe heightened anxiety, hypervigilance, grief, guilt, and the haunting feeling of being a bad person. These burdens spill into the body as well. Sleep disturbances, health problems, and a tendency to neglect self-care. And yet, what complicates the picture is that many survivors can simultaneously appear fine. They may function well at work, manage parenting or caregiving responsibilities, and stay engaged in friendships and family life. To outside observers, including therapists, this can be perplexing. The person doesn't fit neatly into a diagnostic box. They are not exactly suffering from complex PTSD, nor are they simply anxious or depressed. Instead, their experience reflects a category of its own, shaped by the nuances of narcissistic abuse. When the relationship leans toward the malignant, marked by coercive control, gaslighting, or physical abuse, the aftermath tends to resemble post-traumatic stress more closely. Survivors may live in a constant state of hyperarousal, feeling their bodies perpetually on edge. Avoidance behaviors, flashbacks, emotional numbing, and the inability to feel joy become common. In long-term situations of this kind, the fallout can look strikingly like complex PTSD, with the same patterns of vigilance, disconnection, and intrusive memories. But not all narcissistic relationships follow this trajectory. When the partner is a vulnerable narcissist, the survivor's wounds often take on a different quality. The usual confusion, self-blame, and exhaustion are still there, but laid on top is the heavy weight of moral injury. Survivors may believe that leaving the relationship, or even acknowledging the narcissism for what it is, makes them disloyal or cruel. They may feel that by stepping away, they are abandoning someone fragile, someone struggling with anxiety, insecurity, or painful past. Vulnerable narcissists often highlight their suffering, insisting they didn't mean to cause harm, only to repeat the behavior again. They may plead that they cannot survive without the relationship, intensifying the survivor's guilt. This dynamic leaves many people feeling trapped, torn between the instinct for self-preservation and the moral weight of not wanting to hurt someone who appears perpetually wounded. This duality, the pull between trauma and moral injury, is what makes the aftermath of narcissistic relationships so complex. Survivors are not merely healing from harm. They are also wrestling with a distorted sense of responsibility, empathy, and loyalty that keeps them bound to the very person who hurt them. The scars are therefore both psychological and ethical, demanding not only recovery of self but also a release from misplaced guilt. One of the most striking aspects of surviving a narcissistic relationship is the way moral injury can reshape a person's self-perception. Survivors may come to believe that they are the disloyal ones, too demanding, too critical, too needy, or somehow fundamentally flawed. The fallout of this kind of moral injury often mirrors post-traumatic symptoms: sadness, anxiety, helplessness, and self-blame. But it comes from a very different psychological stance. Instead of holding the belief that something terrible was done to them, survivors feel that they themselves committed the wrong. This dual weight, carrying both the knowledge of being harmed and the conviction of having caused harm, is uniquely devastating. It is the paradoxical space many survivors of narcissistic relationships inhabit, suspended between victimhood and misplaced guilt. This is particularly common in relationships with vulnerable narcissists, whether they are intimate partners or family members. Survivors frequently describe overwhelming guilt, pity, and a nagging feeling that leaving makes them heartless. They feel caught in a double bind where either choice is punishing. If they remain, they are forced to stay small and silent, absorbing the narcissist's endless victimhood, sulking resentment, and passive-aggressive anger. If they leave, they are tormented by guilt and, in some cases, fear that the narcissist may spiral into self-destruction, leaving the survivor burdened with responsibility. It becomes a lose-lose scenario that corrodes one's sense of agency. This experience stands in contrast to relationships with malignant narcissists. In those cases, the dominant emotion is not guilt but fear. Survivors grapple with terror of what might follow separation, explosive rage, retaliatory abuse, stalking, or physical violence. They fear the psychological games that may continue, the loss of financial stability, or the erosion of safety itself. For them, the choice is not truly a choice but a calculation of risks. Remain in a relationship that is coercive, exploitative, and dangerous, or attempt to leave and risk retaliation. Unlike with vulnerable narcissists, moral injury is less central here. The survivor does not typically feel they are the bad one, but rather that there is no safe exit. To complicate matters further, the oscillation between good days and bad days adds another layer of confusion. Even in the most toxic of relationships, there can be moments that feel easier, calmer, or even superficially good. For those entangled with vulnerable narcissists, the good days amplify guilt and hope, creating the illusion that the relationship is not as damaging as it seems. For those with malignant partners, the good days serve as a stark contrast to the terror of the bad ones, making the unpredictability even more destabilizing. There comes a point where the bad days outnumber the good, but the rare moments of peace or excitement make survivors question their own judgment and hold on to hope longer than they should. When survivors begin to awaken to the reality of their relationships and contemplate leaving, these contrasts become especially visible. In my work, I have observed a clear distinction. Survivors of malignant narcissists are most often immobilized by fear and trauma responses, while survivors of vulnerable narcissists are weighed down by guilt, pity, and the belief that leaving makes them cruel. Both sets of survivors wrestle with painful ambivalence, but the emotional texture of their struggles is different. And then there are relationships with grandiose narcissists, which introduce yet another dynamic. Overt rage and aggression often dominate, creating an environment that can be frightening and volatile. Yet the relationship may also carry periods of exhilarating highs, days or moments that feel intoxicating, fun, or even seductive. The cycle alternates between thrilling engagement and painful rejection until, eventually, the excitement gives way to fear and disillusionment. These swings make such relationships uniquely disorienting, pulling survivors into a pattern of attraction and rejection that can be as addictive as it is destructive. When people step out of relationships with grandiose narcissists, the dominant struggle often isn't about fear or moral injury, but a nagging worry. What if I'm wrong? Instead of being consumed by guilt for leaving or terrified of retaliation, they may be haunted by the possibility that their judgment was flawed, that maybe they misread the situation. This makes the decision-making process in such relationships distinct from those involving malignant or vulnerable narcissists. Each type brings its own psychological end game: fear in one, moral injury in another, doubt and potential regret in the third. And because narcissistic personalities don't always fit neatly into one category, these dynamics can also overlap, creating even greater inner conflict. Some people find themselves entangled with partners who embody both malignant and vulnerable traits. This is one of the most difficult positions to be in. Survivors in these relationships are forced to contend with multiple layers of psychological fallout, the terror and hypervigilance associated with trauma, the guilt and pity stirred up by vulnerability, and the weight of moral injury. They may feel trapped between fear of danger and sorrow for their partner's suffering, constantly pulled in opposite directions. These survivors often face some of the steepest challenges because they are simultaneously juggling post-traumatic stress, complex trauma, moral conflict, and fear. Recognizing the dynamics of a narcissistic relationship is difficult enough, but awareness often creates another burden: the pressure to act. Survivors wrestle with agonizing questions. Should they remain and try to endure? Should they set firmer boundaries? Should they pull away? Or should they cut ties completely? Each option carries its own weight, and the decision is never simple. The reality is that most survivors are already carrying a heavy psychological load, shaped in part by the specific type of narcissistic relationship they endured, and this makes clear decision-making extraordinarily difficult. If you find yourself caught between fear and self-blame, oscillating between the terror of what might happen and the suspicion that you are the one in the wrong, understand this: you are not alone. What holds you in that loop is not weakness or failure of character, but the trauma bond itself, a powerful emotional tether that lingers long after the reality of the patterns is clear. That bond clouds judgment, stays misplaced loyalty, and keeps survivors questioning themselves even when the truth is plain to see. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the value of your presence here and the attention you've given to this message, because time and energy are precious, and the choice to spend them here truly matters. If something within these words has sparked a new understanding, given you strength in a difficult moment, or provided a sense of comfort, then I warmly encourage you to help carry that impact forward, perhaps by liking, sharing your thoughts in a comment, subscribing for more, or passing this along to someone else who may be in need of the same encouragement. Even the simplest act of support can make a meaningful difference, not only by allowing this space to continue to expand, but also by ensuring that these messages of healing and hope find their way to others who are still searching for light as they walk through their own journeys of recovery.